A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the Roundtable. This is the nation's number one talk, news and sports radio station, Nigeria Info FM. Good afternoon, Joyce. Good to see you and thank you so much for the handover.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to be joined by my colleagues across the nation. As you know, the Roundtable began yesterday with the Morning Crossfire team across all stations in Lagos, in Port Harcourt and in Abuja. I think it was a very fantastic conversation. It does continue today on the sunny side. Once again, I am Gabriella, welcoming you to the Roundtable for today. Joining me, starting with Port Harcourt, my colleague Sam Chinedu is here. Good afternoon, Sam. Thank you for joining us on the Roundtable today.
Good afternoon, Gabriella. It's a pleasure to be here. I mean, the Roundtable has no edges. That's the beautiful thing about it. And I hope that we have wonderful conversations today. Good afternoon to everyone across Nigeria.
Good afternoon. Looking forward to very exciting conversations as well. Welcome. And in Lagos, you already heard her voice. Joyce, the host of The Sunny Side, also joins us for the conversation today. Good afternoon once again, Joyce.
Good afternoon, ladies. My pleasure being here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And joining us all the way from Abuja, actually, it's her birthday today. Swat is the host of The Sunny Side, and it turns out to be her birthday. Good afternoon, Swat. And I do hope we're going to be sharing some cake before the end of the conversation.
Oh, wow. Definitely. Virtual cake, that is.
Well, we wouldn't mind. Better that than nothing at all. Good afternoon. Yes, you're welcome.
Definitely.
And we also have joining us for the conversation. He is head of the editorial board in Lagos, Aghogho Oboh. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Gabriella.
All right, I think we're ready to run and roll. We're going to be having interesting conversations today, talking about some major stories this year so far. We're going to talk about the Twitter ban that was lifted in January this year. That ban started in June, on the 5th of June. The Nigerian government, placed a ban on Twitter, the use of Twitter in Nigeria. We'll have that conversation. We're also going to be talking about the death of Sylvester. You remember the 12-year-old boy who was a student at John College, Sylvester Oromoni. We're going to have that conversation as well. He died in November the 30th of last year, but that conversation spanned all the way to January. So we're also going to be talking about that. And yesterday, the Morning Crossfire team kicked off talking about inflation. I don't think there'll ever be an end to talking about that because it bites us all. So we're going to also talk about that and perhaps the way forward, when it comes to that. And just maybe we get a touch on the Grammys and maybe also, get to touch on some of the issues as we go. And by the way, Nigeria failed to qualify for the World Cup. That is something. Well, let's set the ball rolling, talking about the Twitter ban that was lifted in January. Now, from the 5th of June last year to the 13th of January, the government of Nigeria officially banned Twitter and restricted it from operating across the country. And this ban occurred after Twitter deleted some tweets that were made by the president of the country, as you know, and it kind of scared quite a number of conversations and backlash from Nigerians across the nation, wondering why such a step will be taken. There were several factors that were considered as to why the decision was made by the federal government, amongst so many other things. The government did mention that there were issues of misinformation, fake news spread, through that platform, Twitter, and so many other things. Now, the minister, Lai Mohammed, also stated that, the ban will be lifted once Twitter submitted to, local licenses, amongst many other conditions that we'll be looking at later. But let me start with you, Joyce. You're in Lagos, and Lagos obviously felt the heat of that ban. How would you say Lagosians, took the news of the ban? And when it was lifted in January, do you think there was any impact on the way people actually use that platform?
So first, they boycotted it. VPNs became a thing. And thanks to the tech heads within the Nigerian society, one, as a developing nation, one thing that has quite developed unhinged would be the sense for technology. So either the sense of technology and the consumption of technology is actually growing at a very, very rapid pace. Now, the government indeed placed a ban. Only the not so tech savvy people pretty much felt the limitation. In fact, if you had a friend who had a friend, you pretty much already heard about VPN. So even though the ban was existing on one hand, it didn't quite appear that the limitation actually did affect people directly. Maybe incomes, particularly companies who had to run businesses on Twitter. Maybe their income was, touched in a manner. In fact, it was, because the figures were given as to how much Nigeria lost due to the ban. But as far as expression goes on Twitter, it continued. Now, the thing I think I'm grateful for is the will for Nigerians to survive. We lost money, and I wish we didn't. And maybe the government might not have thoroughly thought out the need to ban it, and maybe they subsequently understood the consequence of the ban, which I would believe maybe was one of the reasons that led to the lifting of the ban. But Nigerians will always find a way, and Twitter ban, if it's anything to go by, is proof. The Nigerians will always find a way.
I totally agree with you. I mean, Nigeria has held a reputation of, always finding a way out of anything. We are resilient people. Sometimes I think that's even a bad thing. In cases where we're supposed to speak out and put a foot down, we tend to just find a way and, make the most out of it. Let me come to you, Aghogho. Now, there's been long-held concerns over the use of Twitter, especially by this current government. Now, the biggest protest that Nigeria has ever recorded began on Twitter. There are about 48 million tweets in 10 days. That's really huge. And there's also before that been considerations of social media regulations on different occasions prior to that ban. There were also attempts, to pass an anti-social media bill, which failed majorly due to the outcry still on Twitter. Now, in your opinion, why do you think it was so important to the government to somewhat tame the liberties people expressed on these social media platforms, and of course still do express?
Yeah, so the thing is with the government over time, the need to always want to respond to criticism, which people had complained about in the past, that if they continue with this sort of tendency, they will get to a stage where everything that goes out on Twitter will suddenly be viewed from a prism that is biased towards them, and that's exactly what happened and led to the ban, unfortunately. If you ask me what has happened since the ban was lifted and how the government now has viewed tweets which are critical of what it's doing, its policy, it's neither here nor there, because if you go and look at what are considered the people who are critics of government and the opposition party, it's still the same sort of language you get to see. And about the code of conduct, whether or not that can ever work, I doubt it seriously. I mean, those of us who've been in the social media space for years have had to learn to put on a thick skin, crocodile skin.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you ask people by large how they've been able to handle their social media space, they'll tell you that after a while you sort of would get immune to those attacks and arguments. So, unfortunately, this administration is outgoing. So, you'd probably not have the chance to assess how they will deal going forward with the elections, which will provide a litmus test to see how they've developed a thick skin or not. So that means that everyone who is coming in now got a clean slate. So they're ready to take in the missiles when it comes, and they would not have an incumbent government to defend them or not defend them. But I'm not too sure whether we've learned any lessons with the Twitter ban in respect to whether there's a code of ethics or there's an appropriate way to behave. That's a different conversation altogether. Maybe several years of experience, which I doubt we'll have the opportunity, even if we had 100 years of practicing on social media, whether there will be a common denominator in saying this is how we should behave in social media, this is how we should react in social media, or where do we cross the line where freedom of expression is being impugned.
And I think that's really concerning. But let me take you from what you mentioned earlier. Now, do you think that, seeing that this government is obviously outgoing and we're going to have, another, dispensation, do you think that's going to set a negative precedent as to, how the liberties of Nigerians are tampered upon? Oh,
that's a big one. Because if you think about the previous administrations, how they've dealt with social media in the past, well, they did have the opportunity, but this administration did make a lot of use of social media in the run-up to the 2015 general elections. If you recollect all of the talk about the toxic atmosphere in the lead of the 2015 general election, there were a huge part of it. So they came in, people thought maybe that would be an opportunity for them to make the space more open. Well, unfortunately, the first opportunity they had, they clamped down. And that's what the legacy will be for this administration, that they clamped down on the social media and civic space by what they did. The Jonathan administration did more with the clamp down on, I remember very famously what happened when they went around newspaper stands and were seizing newspapers and stormed some newspaper houses. But if you compare and contrast, it appears that with every administration, the levels of intolerance is being tested. So the next one will look and say, well, maybe we'll do better or worse than the one that we are going to succeed.
And it's just really painful because it seems as though that, with every new government, we tend to miss the previous governments. I do hope that's not the case in this time. I mean, remember, the time of Jonathan, people were complaining and say, oh, he was a terrible president. And now in the time of the current government, we're saying, oh, wow, well, we miss Jonathan's regime. I do hope that we do not begin to look back at today and say, oh, wow, we missed this. It's just a very funny pattern with Nigeria. Well, let me come to you, Chinedu. 3 days after the ban, it was reported that the ban had cost the country over 6 billion naira. Joyce indeed mentioned that and how much Nigeria as a nation, as an economy, lost, and it also contributed to the worsening level of unemployment in the country. There are lots of creators, digipreneurs, influencers, online vendors, you name it, who came out to bitterly, express how the ban had affected their source of income. Now, in your opinion, how did Port Harcourt people react to the news of this ban being lifted in January? Do you think it was a sigh of relief and, a dance of jubilation? Or would you say perhaps people had already settled into alternate means of survival? Just like Joyce mentioned earlier, Nigerians always have a way of finding a way out of everything. So do you think that was the case for people here in Port Harcourt?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when it was lifted, it was to everybody's advantage. 6 million after 3 days and hundreds of millions really at the end of the 7th-month space. So lots of people loved the fact that it was lifted. I remember hearing about VPN for the first time a couple of years ago, for the very first time from some tech guy. When he needed access to some materials that were not available in his country. So, yes, it was frustrating. It was not wonderful to have been banned from Twitter. But again, like Joyce said, we find a way. We move around it. My concern is for a government that claims that it looks to provide 3 million jobs every year, a government that says it's going to take 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And doing this, maybe they did not see the implication when they placed the ban. But as time elapsed, you began to get data, began to get figures that people were losing money. The unemployment rate is like 33%. And then you're doing something that could plunge people further into unemployment. So the reasonable thing to do was to lift the ban after a couple of weeks, after a couple of months, but it lasted for 7 months. So that tells you that, the sentiment of certain people in authority is more important than due process. So Port Harcourt was elated, of course. We were relieved when the ban was lifted.
Now, let me take you from what you just said. I find it very interesting because, again, from what you're saying, what I hear is we probably have a government that maybe will not necessarily care about its economy and the money it's losing. So do you think perhaps the motive behind the ban, on the part of the government was a higher priority to the government as opposed to the monies it was losing? Because again, for any economy like ours that is, still trying to find stability, you would want to think that, losing such amount of money, that was just in 3 days. We lost way more than that at the end of the 6 months and counting that the ban, was on. So do you think that, the government was more particular about its purpose towards the ban as opposed to the monies that it was losing?
The first thing you want to ask is, why did the ban happen in the first place? That's the first question. So basically, a tweet from our president was deleted, and that led to the ban. A couple of months earlier, Twitter basically suspended Donald Trump's account. This was not the case of deleting a tweet. It was suspending the account. We did not see the United States of America ban Twitter in the US. We didn't see that. But now our president's tweet is deleted. And the response is, oh, we banned Twitter. On the government side, you hear things like, oh, the platform has been used to incite, it was used during the NSAS protest, fake news, misinformation and all that. That was the official position of our government. So if you understand what the motive was for the ban in the first place, you can understand what the priorities are. Of course, every regular government should consider employment, they should think about how to make life better for their people. But the motive would inspire what action follows. So basically, what's the motive right? That's the question that tells us whether or not the government cares if people are unemployed, or if we're losing money, or if it lasted for 7 months. All of those would follow if we understand the motive.
Very valid question. I'd like to also mention at this time that we're streaming live on all platforms. If you do have questions, you'd like to be a part of the conversation, you can absolutely do that across our social media platforms. On Facebook, we're streaming live as well as on YouTube. Let me go to Abuja. Swat, let's take a look at the conditions that were given by the government to Twitter. Considering lifting the ban, there was the issue of local licensing, asking that they be licensed by the Broadcasting Commission, registered, and must agree not to allow its platform to be used by those who are promoting activities that are inimical to the corporate existence of Nigeria. They're also supposed to pay applicable tax and establish a legal entity within the country sometime in this year. Now, do you think that these conditions, assuming they've all been met, has somewhat had any impact on the use of that platform, Twitter? As a matter of fact, social media as a way of, expression of freedom.
Okay. First of all, I think the Nigerian government just took this action without premeditating on what the consequences would be, in terms of the economic loss that a lot of Nigerians incurred. Okay, there's a feedback. I don't think that was premeditated upon. But then at the end of the day, I think you asked a question as to whether we've achieved the reason. Oh God, this feedback is getting to me.
Yes, what? I'm with you.
Yeah, sorry. So what I was trying to say is, I don't think the Nigerian government actually took the time to look at it from a holistic perspective. I think they were on about social media and how Nigerians, of course, were misusing it, going out of line. And of course, we cannot take away the fact that Nigerians were very notorious for that. Nigerians, you see how we are not very careful in terms of the use of social media. I'm sorry to say. But you see, people, because they have access to social media, would just go ahead and use words carelessly. And sometimes I think it's just a bit excess. So at the end of the day, that ban came because President Muhammadu Buhari tweeted, and I think on the side of the government, what temerity do you have to delete the tweet of the Nigerian president? And so they went ahead to just quickly ban Twitter, because I felt that was just the right opportunity that they had, to do that without actually thinking of what would be the eventual consequence. And so at the end of the day, we heard those conditions mentioned. Okay, Twitter has to, come and have a physical presence in Nigeria, by getting a country director, respect for national security and cohesion and all of that. And some of the question I asked when I saw those conditions that were released by the government is that, first of all, is it Twitter that is using, Nigeria, or Nigerians are using Twitter as a platform? So what's the essence of saying that, they must respect Nigeria's culture or national cohesion and all of that? Because it's Nigerians who use that platform to tweet and all of that, So it's a platform that Nigerians use. I don't know what is, or I don't see the sense in saying that we must respect culture and all of that, because it's Nigerians at the end of the day that are using the Twitter platform. Then secondly, talking about the presence of Twitter or paying taxes. We are in a digital age. This is 2022, for God's sake. There's something that you call the TIN, or the TIN, in the sense that anybody can have a business located in any part of the world, or you can carry out business in any part of the world without you having a physical presence there. I'm sure a lot of us probably use some sort of business platforms or social media, or transact business in other parts of the world. For example, YouTube. You can earn, even though you have your business presence in other parts of the world, and at the end of the day, you are able to pay some taxes without necessarily having a physical presence there. So that was one question I also had. Do we have to go to that extent? We're also in a case or in an age where, cybersecurity is a big thing for a lot of countries. So you trying to say that, Twitter must come into the country, establish their presence. You find countries trying by all means to ensure that, that internet security is a big thing for them, something that they guard very jealously. Because in the age that we live in, it's no more about military might, but of course we know about soft power, how countries can attack other countries through the use of internet and a whole lot of things like that. So some of those conditions, to be honest, I think it was something that was not premeditated, or at the end of the day, it was a last minute thing that the government had to come up with to give out as reasons why Twitter, needed to be suspended. And we might say, yes, we have seen some of the conditions being met, but honestly, for me, it doesn't make any difference, or it hasn't really made much difference at the end of the day.
Right. I have to apologize at this time. I missed out on one of my colleagues from Abuja. Solomon Ndahi is joining us as well. Good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us. My apologies.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. And just like you said, it's a wonderful day to discuss national issues. Now, on this particular issue concerning the Twitter,
I'll have to come back to you, Solomon. If you don't mind, I'll come back to you. Let me quickly get back to Lagos. Now, Aghogho, since 2015, at least 71 countries across the world has blocked or, to some regard, restricted access to social networks, be it Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. Now, this is a result of the Online Privacy and Security Company. They had a study of 193 UN nations, and we have the likes of Russia, Norway, and some other countries making that list. 71 countries. So this is not peculiar to us in Nigeria or to our government. Now, do you think this in any way has impacted on our international reputation as a somewhat democratic nation?
Interestingly, if you place that side by side with indices around how Nigeria is ranked democratically, we're just one step above what you would call a tyranny in terms of how democracy happens.
Wow.
So, interestingly,
Okay.
yes, which is why many times when you open the phone lines, I guess several OAPs have to have that sort of feedback from the listening audience. They say things like, "Oh, we cannot see the difference between this and a military era," and the truth is
Right.
that it's because of the parameters used in measuring between what a democratic nation indeed is and what a military regime is. It's really close where we are, unfortunately, in 23 years. 23 years rather, for an interrupted democracy. So many of those parameters, which include the freedom of speech, for example, and a free press, and a more improved civic space, is tied to what is going on social media. Whether we like it or not, it's the future of media. I don't even think it's the future, it's what is happening now. People turn more to the online media now to get their information, and even regular media now have to have their spaces in the social media to have a voice. Otherwise, they're going to be wiped out in I wouldn't even say years. They were wiped out in months in terms of how relevant they really should be. So when you think about just how we're dealing with the social media space, we'll have to find a way to get involved. When we're doing things, even as regular practitioners, we're dealing with things like how to detect fake news. We're dealing with things about how to engage the public better through social media. And these are tools which you need in democratic setup. Get the right feedback. And through that feedback, you can know whether the policy is working or isn't working. But unfortunately, those in authority and will prefer more to clamp down. I think and I believe that we should see more the advantages in opening up the space rather than in closing the space and looking at what the negatives are.
Now, let me come to you, Joyce. Based on what he just said, I mean, we're in a new dispensation. Literally, we're in a time where the social media space determines everything, from the way you live your lives, from the way you do business, to the degree of influence that you have, to the amount of money that you can make potentially, to literally everything about the way we do life as humans. Do you think perhaps there is something we can do as Nigerians, to, just like he mentioned, take off that limitation that somewhat the government is trying to place on its people. We're supposed to be moving forward, but it seems as though we're moving backwards in that regard. So is there something you think Nigerians can actually do to maybe trigger the conscience of the government?
The people are the government. The people need to vote in a futurist. To look at social media is even a narrow way to perceive the future. Facebook has changed its name from Facebook to Meta. There is now a new concept by Facebook. It's only new because now it's being commercialized. It's called the metaverse, where you exist in a digital world. We have no other option but advancement, and we need a futurist who is able to interpret freedom, particularly the freedom for the new world. There is a new world that has come, and we are either
sorry to cut you in there, but I feel like Nigerians don't like futurists.
You don't have a choice. It's so a very narrow way to put it is more like it's do or die. You're on the grid or you're off the grid. You don't have a choice. The world is moving in a certain direction. Okay, so a very good way to look at it would be fossil fuel, and the fact that by 2020, the World Economic Forum is saying that they want to eradicate, totally bring to a halt the use of fossil fuels. And so they're talking about alternative energy. And the last COP meeting that was held, it's reported that the first world nations pretty much have themselves sorted. And Africa, well, is game. You get what you get. You come on board or you don't, but you don't even have a choice because the people who are making these decisions are first world nations. So, I don't even think that we don't like futurists. I think we don't even understand the circumstances of human advancement, because once you understand it, it's the only option that you have. So I'm hoping that the people understand what advancement is, and then they find someone who can make the best policies for them in the new world that has come. I mean, they're NFTs. Real estate has been sold online. You're going to be buying houses you're never going to live in. It's a new type of interpretation of both human expression and human freedom. So I hope that we know that we are going to need a futurist. Otherwise, we're going to remain in the hinterlands and in the villages. And a nation as big as Nigeria can become a relic if we don't advance the cause of our future as a nation.
The only thing I'm thinking right now, wondering right now, is where can we find this futurist messiah?
So I don't think
we find them coming out to campaign.
So now here is the thing. I was going to reference Peter Obi later on the show. Now, for example, you look at a Peter Obi and you look at what he might embody. I don't know him to any personal degree to speak on him. But if you look at what his potentials are, what you can assume to be his embodiment as a young Nigerian who just talks about, for example, something as, I don't think it's trivial, but that's exactly how I want to put it. Something as commonplace as economic advancement. It's not rocket science. So you have a guy as Peter Obi. He sounds like he has, he appears to be the guy with the head on his shoulders who can nearly comprehend the future. Now that's who you might consider that. And I'll leave it at that for now because I want to speak about that later on in the conversation.
Yeah, that's a very good idea, Joyce. Let me get back to you, Abuja. Solomon. Now, while Swat was speaking earlier, she did mention the fact that, one of the reasons why, the ban was even, placed in the first place was because of a tweet the president had made. Indeed, that was. And it kind of, the message that would, send across is, I'm the president. How dare you take down my tweets, So do you think that perhaps the president of a country should be, I don't know, do I say above the laws guiding social media regulations? This is not peculiar to us. I mean, a clear case example will be Donald Trump, the former president of the US, and Twitter as well. So do you think perhaps that is the message the government was subtly trying to pass across?
Okay, thank you so much. Just like you've mentioned, this happened some time ago, and it has to do with the federal government, the president in particular, as well as the Ministry of Information, because don't forget, whatever media we have in Nigeria, whether it be social media, the conventional media, it is being regulated by the federal government through the Ministry of Information and Culture, which is currently headed by Lai Mohammed. Now, coincidentally, I cover that particular ministry for this very esteemed organization. And clearly, when this ban was put in effect, a lot of people came out to ask several questions. We saw different stakeholders questioning the whole idea behind the ban. But one thing everybody must continue to know is that the most important thing for every government in every nation, be it in Africa, be it abroad, wherever you are, is the fact that you must continue to provide security and ensure that the lives and livelihoods of the people are protected under any circumstance. Now, the federal government in banning Twitter clearly came out to say that it was a security threat that made them ban Twitter. What happened was that they were scared that the platform could be used to incite some form of violence in the country. Now, in as much as I will not come out to confirm, because I don't work with government and I'm not privileged to the kind of information they have or they are privileged to, but you must understand that it is the sole responsibility of government to protect its citizens. And if that ban was put in effect to protect the citizens, we must begin to ask questions more carefully. Yes, a lot of money was lost, and that is very sad, because Nigeria is a country as it stands now, not just in Nigeria, generally in the world, we cannot afford to lose any more. You cannot afford to lose money or lose businesses, especially with the pandemic and all its negative effects. But the primary aim of every government, and I will state this and restate it, be it in Africa, be it anywhere in the world, is to ensure the protection of lives of all the citizens. And if the federal government tells you that Twitter had the capacity, especially with what was going on within that period, to threaten the peace and internal security of Nigeria, then you must stick with the federal government. I'm not saying they are right. I'm not justifying what they did. I'm not in any way within their corner, but I must tell you that, they have the right to do so. And the president, just like you said, he's definitely not above the law. Everyone that has been elected to any position in this country would do that through a constitution that is recognized. And that same constitution says the law is supreme. So nobody's above the law, but do not forget that sometimes when it comes to issues of national security, this is not the first country it's happening. This is not the first time it's happening in Nigeria. National security sometimes trumps every other thing. I wouldn't say trump the constitution, but in the context of which it happened, I think it's very important that we understand the federal government's motive. I am not justifying it. I'm not saying they were right, but their explanation to some certain extent, as the correspondent within the ministry, I seem to understand, because we have seen cases of the social media or even the conventional media like us being used to propagate a lot of evil, a lot of harm. Don't forget the genocide in Rwanda. We all know what happened in Rwanda. It was simply information, and it has led to one of the greatest loss of human lives I've ever seen within our time. So we must continue to always balance this. In as much as a lot of money was lost, these issues concerning the ban are very close to that of the violation of our human rights to express ourselves. Yes, that contentious issues that must be looked at, but we must also look at the government from the position where they come, and when they tell you that they did this for the purpose of security, you must give them the benefit of the doubt.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think I'll just stay on that for a minute. That was also a valid argument a lot of people had, saying, look, in as much as the government has banned Twitter, people are shouting about it, but let's look at how not just Twitter but social media platforms has been used as a tool to spread fake information, fake news, and cause for harm, trigger violence, incite all kinds in not just Nigeria, across the world, as a matter of fact. Now, one of the things that people also have a problem with is not the fact that social media needs some kind of regulation, but the governments that we have, we understand the body language of the Nigerian government, be it past or present. It's not peculiar to any government, right? And one major problem Nigerians have is the issue of trust. Can we trust the government not to abuse the rights of Nigerians? So yes, we do have a problem of fake news, spreading false information, inciting harm on, fellow Nigerians. But can Nigerians actually trust their government not to take advantage of that, Solomon? Solomon, are you there?
Okay, just like you've said, yes, a lot of people have come out to question the validity of the government's argument when it concerns doing this for the purpose of national security. But now the truth of the matter is, in as much as a lot of people do not agree with the government, how are you sure that what they have done has not actually averted some form of crisis? Because to be very honest, within that period that the president actually did that particular tweet, it was deleted and all the controversies surrounding it, you could see that we were witnessing some form of social, religious, ethnic, permit me to join it that way, form of tension within the country in different parts. And Nigeria is probably the most diverse nation in the world. So when you have issues like this, sometimes you take a blanket measure to avert what you might not even be fully aware is a potential danger. So I believe government, in as much as it has cost us a lot, and it's very sad because this is not the period to lose money, but you must always look at the bigger picture. And I assure you, there's always a bigger picture in any argument or any discussion. Yes, there might be smaller issues, there might be bigger issues, but there is always the biggest issue. And I think in this particular case or in this context, the government
right
issue.
Sorry, Gabriella.
Right.
Sorry, Gabriella. I was going to ask Solomon because I was going to ask Solomon. So before you add to that, since you're close to Lai Mohammed in the Ministry of Information, the sunny side, the sun shines. I guess the sun shines differently. Minister of Information. Can you tell me, Solomon, the public approval rating of this administration? I really like to know, because I've been very curious to know what the public approval rating has been, so that the question around whether people believe it or don't believe it, we can also to objectively look at that.
Can I say something?
Yes, sure. Swat, go ahead.
All right, so I just wanted to make a comment about what Solomon said, about the government and all of that. Yeah, that was what the government said, and I still insist that it was a spontaneous action the government took because they were looking for opportunities to just, stifle Nigerians, and that's very sure. We saw instances of where the government, of course, were trying to introduce the social media bill and the stiff resistance that Nigerians gave to it, and so basically when that incident of the president putting out that tweet. And in trying to look at the tweet that the president put out there, what did the president say? I feel that what the president tweeted was even more dangerous or inimical to the unity and to the security. He said something about reminding the Igbo or IPOB about what happened in 1967, knowing the sort of dissatisfaction and agitation that was ongoing in the country. I think if anything else, this same government are the beneficiaries of social media that we have in Nigeria. I mean, let's take our minds back to 2015, 2019, how this government rode on the back of Twitter, most especially, to put out tweets there. Many of them, I think I can safely say that most of the tweets that they put out there, I'm not talking only of the APC and PDP, they were very hateful tweets out there, just trying to throw jibes, not even minding what those tweets or those the use of social media was capable of doing, inciting a whole lot of primordial sentiments based on ethnicity and a whole lot of other stuff. And even while in government, we've seen instances where government put out tweets or use social media in such a way that you can qualify it to be hateful. But who are we as citizens to come out and say, well, Nigeria, the government is this, So we cast our mind back to what happened, a similar incident that the Donald Trump put out a tweet. His tweet was deleted. He was suspended from Twitter. The heavens did not come down. So why is it that, for me, considering what President Muhammadu Buhari tweeted, talking about war, trying to remind people of a war that has come and gone and has left a lot of deep wounds that are yet to have, or we're yet to have a closure with that. I think that should be even of more concern than what Nigerians are. I'm still going back to my statement, or still saying that, yes, we need to regulate ourselves as Nigerians in terms of the usage of social media and some of the tweets that we put out there. But more than ever before, we've seen the government using the social media in such a way that you could tag without putting some measure of caution upon themselves, and which was much more incapable of, heating up the polity here and there. So, I think it was just something they wanted to do because it's a case of how dare you to delete the tweet of the Nigerian president, much more than this issue or this case of security. I really don't believe that. I'm sorry to say.
All right, I have like a million things to say. Of course, to Solomon. Now, saying that it's possible what the government did averted something. I mean, it's a possibility because we can never prove it. It falls within the realm of possibility. But you need to look at the implication of the action. The reason why we have a democracy, the reason why we vote leaders into power is for them to use strategy to tackle things. That's why there are ministries. That's why there are advisors. You don't see what looks like a problem and immediately shut down the entire system. Now, here in Port Harcourt, there was a problem that happened in some neighborhood. PhD staff claimed that two men came to their office and beat a member of their staff. And for that reason, they cut power to that neighborhood for weeks or months. Now, what happened was obviously wrong, but you don't let other people suffer because of what happened to two members of staff. You tackle it as you should. So if the government, as you've stated, Solomon, believes that, the use of Twitter, it incites, it will lead to war, fire will come down and all of that. If you cannot think of a way to handle that problem, if banning Twitter for 7 months is the only solution that comes to mind, then it makes people question I don't want to say intelligence, but that's where I'm going, of the people in certain positions. So, if there is a problem, yes, you have the intelligence that we don't have. But shutting down that platform for 7 months does not seem like the answer to such a problem. And it makes the government look worse.
Solomon. Seems like you're taking the heat, Solomon, for the government. What say you in your defense? Solomon, are you there?
We can't hear him.
Okay. We're going to get back to Solomon shortly. This is still the Roundtable, Nigeria Info, your number one talk, news, and sports radio station. My colleagues across the nation have joined me on this fantastic day to discuss some of the biggest issues that have broken out in this year. We're going to move on to inflation. Remember, you can join the conversation as well. If you do have questions, thoughts, comments you'd like to share, you can go on all our social media platforms and drop your thoughts. We're also on WhatsApp, so you can drop your thoughts as well on WhatsApp. Our WhatsApp number is 0809 030 6416. 0809 030 6416. Let's talk about inflation. Now, the National Bureau of Statistics says that Nigeria's inflation rate has increased to 17.71% on a year-on-year basis in May. That's no news anymore. We already know that. And it's been higher than the rate for Africa and some other sub-Saharan countries for many years now. And we're not particularly seeing a significant decrease in sight anytime soon, sadly. And the bigger problem that we have currently is its unsteadiness. If there were to be some, steady either decline or increase, maybe you might want to begin to understand and navigate around ways to tackle the issue of inflation. But when you have an inflation rate like ours, that is, somewhat bouncing all over the place, like Nigeria's, it shows sign of a struggling economy. It causes prices to fluctuate. Today, you're buying bread at 1,000 naira. Who knows if in 2023, a day to the elections, we're going to be buying bread at 2,000 naira. Who knows? We just never know. It's in a very bad shape. So let me start with you, Sam Chinedu. I know you're a lover of bread, but really,
yes,
when it comes to inflation,
yes, I am.
Who did this to us? What village people would you say are pursuing Nigerians? Who really did this to us? On a serious note, anyway, do you think this is something we should expect every year when it comes to inflation? And especially when you're seeing how the last few years has, recorded a steady rise in our inflation rates.
All right. So when you talk about inflation, I like to think about things in the, if I were to explain it to a child, what's inflation? A consistent rise in price of goods, services, blah, blah, blah. The problem would be answering the second question the child will have. Why are these prices going up? And there are lots of whys. There is the global economy has not recovered from COVID, There is the Russia-Ukraine crisis. The sanctions on Russia is playing its own part. There's the this, there's the that, and there are stats, facts, figures, and many things people would want to say. But you see, the average Nigerian would relate to what is happening with big questions, and I want to think of myself as a common man, because sometimes I don't even get the data. The three questions are, how much is Nigeria owing? Second question, how much are we making? And the third question is, how does it affect my pocket? As a matter of fact, the average Nigerian does not even care about the first two questions. It's the third one.
Right.
So whether they are announcing in the news that things are going up, it's when he steps out of his house and he cannot afford what he used to, that he understands that the economy is doing like this, doing like this. I hope someone gets that reference. You know, so yes, things are going up. Why it's happening, there will always be theories. Oh, it's because this is happening. I was supposed to buy rice today. I haven't bought it yet. I think I will when I leave here. However, with the prices I've heard, my beloved rice is not behaving like rice anymore. It's behaving like something on the menu in a Chinese restaurant. You know, it's obviously more expensive. So, why it's happening? There are lots of whys. Will this continue to happen? The average Nigerian will say, God forbid. And for this conversation, I am the average Nigerian. We hope that it does not continue to happen. I don't know what prices are in Lagos, Abuja, but I have a strong feeling that they are more expensive. And the crazy thing is you're paying more now for less. So that's the craziness about inflation. How does it affect my pockets?
And especially for this current time that we're in, you would find that it's a very peculiar time as opposed to the previous years. Right now, we have even more issues and factors that have influenced the rate of our inflation in 2022. Let me come to you in Abuja, Swat. I mean, there's been many reports of local farmers who have been unable to go to their farms to cultivate for fear of being attacked, you know, by criminal elements. So right now, we're faced with the problem of insecurity, and in some way, either directly or indirectly, it has affected the prices of everything. So, in your opinion, what do you think that perhaps the poor state of insecurity has, you know, affected us? And if so, what is the way out? Because when we talk about insecurity, it seems like an elephant problem. It doesn't seem as a problem that we can, you know, shush away in a couple of months. So if we're faced with a potential threat to, you know, how we live our lives and our means of survival, then what can we possibly do in that regard?
Okay. So obviously, a lot of people think Abuja is one of the safest places. And when you look at the terrain right now, a lot of people, there's an influx of people. And so places before that never even used to have hold up, you know, has lots and lots of hold up. You spend hours before you get home. That's to tell you that people are getting into Abuja, leaving their places, selling their properties and coming into this town, thinking it's one of the safest places. Unfortunately, it's not really like that. Because when you look at the dynamics of the FCT right now, even though you do not have maybe heightened cases of insecurity and kidnapping within the FCT in the metropolis and all of that, but when you go to places, you talk about Kuje, you talk about Gwagwalada, we've had cases of how bandits or kidnappers or terrorists, you know, are reported to come to people's houses and even take them forcefully from there. You know, you go to places like Buhari, these are outskirts, you know, locations, and it's so bad. We get to hear of Zamfara, we get to hear of Sokoto and some northwestern states where there is heightened insecurity, but we never get to really look at it from the purview of Abuja. But I'm telling you, as someone who is here, who receives report, you know, who interacts with people on a daily basis, that the insecurity here is real. And like you rightly said, many of the farmers are right now prevented from going to their farms because everybody is afraid that what if I go and this happens to me if I don't come back alive? You know, I had a case where I was on air on this certain day, and this guy called me. He was close to tears and was telling me of how, you know, he went to his farm and then he saw that people had already come in. They had taken out the yam because he said he had planted yam, and, you know, some unknown people came and, you know, destroyed his farm. And somehow he had an idea of who they could be, but could not even confront them for fear of maybe some people using weapons on him. So this is the case that we have right now. I cannot take away the fact that indeed it is having an adverse effect in terms of food production These
Right.
farmers, of course, try to produce food for themselves and their families. And then when there is the remaining, you get to see them selling it out so that other people can equally have to buy. But it seems insecurity is, like you said, a big hydra-headed monster or some sort of rocket concept for the government that we have not seen a lasting solution being provided. I get worried about the fact that every other time that insecurity happens, where people get to lose their lives, all we hear are statements here and there. We condemn, we will do, we will, and then until the next happens, and then another condolence message and another recommitment to fighting insecurity is made. So, coming to the solution. And if we have to see a reduction in terms of this inflation, which has gone to double digits, in this country, which is quite sad. I know a lot of people will say that, yeah, it's a global thing in the sense that you look at other countries, Europe, America, and so on and so forth. Everybody's talking about inflation and how it has affected the economy. That is for real. But in Nigeria, it's worse. You come down to Africa, it is worse. And that is because of the insecurity that I don't know what is so high. The state is, the government has the sole power to tackle things or issues of insecurity. But all the time we get to see them saying that God will help us, and so it just sells some sense of despair to the people that if the government cannot do so much to help the people, then what is it? But for me, if you ask me, what could be the solution or what will be the best solution? I think it will be, state policing. Recently, we had the Zamfara state government say that the citizens should arm themselves. I think it will start from the government taking a different direction. I mean, if we've been carrying on with policing the way it is, and it's not giving us so much effective result as we expect in reduction of insecurity, I think it's high time for us to begin to look at it from the perspective of probably state policing, local vigilantes, and the likes of them that would actually augment where government is, in terms of lacking in terms of being very effective. Because as long as this insecurity continues, a lot of people have given up hope of going back to the farms. They'd rather stay back at home because you want to wake up and be alive and go about your duty. I mean, if not farming, you can maybe go and hustle in other areas. So these are some of the issues, combined with global factors and other factors here and there, maybe monetary policy of the CBN that has contributed to the high inflation that we're experiencing. And I'm sure none of us is, you not tell me that you're not experiencing because it's the same market all of us go to. So basically, let's look at it from the perspective of state policing. This issue of saying that citizens should pick up arms, I don't think we're mature for that right now in Nigeria as it is. So I think that is, from the very many solutions that abound, we could start by, giving the vigilantes a little bit more power because they know the community, community policing and then state policing. Let's see how this will go a long way at helping with issues of insecurity so that eventually inflation may just begin to reduce.
Right. I'm going to take you up on that again when it comes to state policing and how that works. But let me get to Lagos, Aghogho. Now, Nigeria seems to be making some big leaps, forward in terms of manufacturing, technological developments, especially in the private sector. You find a lot of Nigerians who are, finding a way out for themselves in tech, especially in manufacturing as well. And that obviously holds a potential to boost our natural resource, including natural gas, as a matter of fact. All in all, Nigeria and its inflation seems to be, on the upward swing, or perhaps still part of stabilization, if we could hope for that. Now, do you think perhaps the efforts from, these technological developments will be strong enough to break the level of inflation that we have suffered in the past years?
They call this one jam question, eh? In fact,
oh my!
I can't remember what she said that. What the solution was? I was like, it's a solution to our problems, because a lot of people who are sending me comments don't think that we have solutions to our problems. I was listening to Sonny Okosun the other day about Which Way Nigeria. A lot of people, young people, were amazed that he was very apt about the problems they were facing in 1983. I thought, was this song released just now? I guess the same experience they will have for Sam's definition of asking us in Lagos what the cost price of food items to the market is. They just go listen to Fela's overtake, don't overtake. The young man who was going to buy a fan and kept saving 10 naira every time he goes to the market. They've added 20 naira to it. until eventually he could not buy that fan again. And I guess it's the story for all of us who intend to do the Robinson Crusoe economy, which is consumption equals to income. We can't even save. So on the question around the manufacturer, I'm wondering where the bright lights are when we think about the power situation for a start. Every single person is bleeding. I mean, businesses are having to spend by more than 5-6 times what they were spending because of the cost of diesel. Even the guys so whatever little gains we perhaps may have made in the past is going to be swallowed up by how much people are spending in operating costs for their businesses. Which is the argument we've had over and over again. We're at war feuding with international monetary institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, asking us to do certain things which we know are going to do more damage to us, simply because they don't understand that if this talk about subsidizing, it's actually subsidizing our entire life. The fuel that they think is subsidy for the petrol for vehicles, a large part of it goes into running businesses. This country is a country which is run basically on diesel and petrol, which is why when we had the problem the other day, everyone was crying because suddenly it occurred to everybody that every single one has got a better pass my neighbor, or they've got, like my mom would say, monkey by grade. So those who have the big plants are running their businesses with it. But even the small micro SMEs are using a better pass my neighbor to run their businesses. So I'm not so optimistic that things will improve dramatically, because if I speak to my barber Blackie at TBS, he say, "Oga, the truth is I want to employ more people, but I'm not going to employ more people because the money that I should have used to employ, I'm using to buy petrol every day." So he's running his business on petrol every day and cannot increase. So that this so-called GDP will continue to grow in small and minute, insignificant figures until we can have the so-called 100,000 megawatts or 200,000 megawatts, which is being made possible now by power generators, which people also now are fearing that if this subsidy is removed, they perhaps will have to buy the price of petrol at the same cost of diesel, which is over 700 now. So just imagine if what would happen if people are having to buy per liter of petrol all across the country, close to 1,000 naira. Will be done for. So those are my thoughts, Gabriella.
Right. Let me come to you, Joyce. Based on what Swat mentioned, there's a potential solution to this crisis will be state policing. Now, we've had several conversations in this regard as to whether or not state policing is going to actually work. Do you believe it's going to work?
Work for what? Inflation or security?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, the level of insecurity
that has affected inflation.
Yes.
Oh no, that's not the problem. You're the government. That's your problem. And these conversations are frustrating, to be honest with you. It's like we go around in circles. We make Nigeria. It seems as though the redemption for Nigeria requires physics, a sort of mythical power. It sounds as every time the Nigerian conversation comes on, it sounds as though what will redeem us, it's outside this world. No, it's not. Right. You need a government. You need a government that works. You need a government whose dignity, whose honor is hinged on its successes. We're not going to assume and then accord power to people who are not capable of delivering what the people want. The people should know what they want. First of all, there is an assumption that the Nigerian economy, works within it's assumed that the Nigerian economy is a monoproduct economy. That's actually false. But then you can't blame people whose opinion it is, because the supposition is that every other sector has been ignored. Look at it. Every state in Nigeria, for example, has a solid mineral. That's one of many things that we have. Every state, in fact, Gombe, Kebbi have, I think maybe Jigawa probably have 1 or 2 solid minerals.
Sure.
Every other state has a multiplicity of minerals. In fact, some states have as much as 21. But here we are, we're complaining about something like cement. Cement's expensive. I feel what we need are leaders who can think. I want to give you a very good example. I want to sample Peter Obi once again. Peter Obi is credited to have done something. And suddenly he appears to be a hero, as though Who he is a scarce commodity. What Peter Obi is what every Nigerian should be. But what is now evinced is the fact that there's so much layered corruption on every single, like every thread. There's just like a corruption in every layer of our Nigerian economy that a Peter Obi can be celebrated as a hero. You need to understand what that means. Peter Obi is a common man who just did. So let me even tell you something I think we can pretty much agree to be the summary of his governance. It's that Peter Obi just saved money. If you don't, he has to forgive me for nearly trivializing the excellence of his work. So what Peter Obi did for Anambra State was save money. That doesn't require genius. That requires a man who chose to hold himself accountable. That's what you don't have. It's not science to fix Nigeria. You need accountable leaders. You need men who can say. So imagine how much Nigeria could save if Nigerian leaders became accountable. So it's not just oil. So first of all, we're overtly dependent on oil. And then there are other sectors. Recently, I hear that the Nigerian government is asking geoscientists to do something about solid minerals. Imagine if Nigerian government invested in manufacturing. I feel that sector has a tendency to explode. But we're just all going to sit down here and make melodies of our sufferings, a record that doesn't sell. I think when the people are ready, their problems change. I'm done. I have nothing else to say.
Well, all right. I must mention at this point that, you can join the conversation on WhatsApp. If you do have comments, the WhatsApp number, once again, is 0809 06416. We're also streaming live across all our platforms on Facebook and YouTube. So go on there at Nigeria Info to join the live stream and drop your comments. Sam, you wanted to mention something.
Yes, I had a lot of things to say after Joyce delivered her speech. So Peter Obi is getting to the conversation, more than required. Now, here's the thing. I agree with her that Peter Obi is a common man. I agree that we have a lot of Peter Obis or people who even think better than him. But this is what I had seen. People like Peter Obi who think like that are not interested in politics. There is a profile of a Nigerian politician. There's a certain, they need to look, act, talk, and think a certain way. So when somebody comes with something that is disruptive, which is not groundbreaking really, it's just thinking differently. That is what Nigerians now want to celebrate. Now, again, like she said, we're not trivializing what he represents or what he's trying to sell. But honestly speaking, if you think about it in the context of how can we solve this problem that seems to never have an end in sight, what he has said so far is it's the chapter one. It's the basic. It's just the basic level. So if you think about it, if you really think about it, there's I don't know, now I'm really losing my words. When we are ready, I think I'll just summarize it the way she said. When we are ready, we'll really know how to tackle this problem. That's what I think.
All right, let's move on from Peter Obi and inflation and move on to other conversations. Remember, we're live on all platforms across Nigeria. This is the Roundtable, brought to you by the nation's #1 talk, news and sports radio station, Nigeria Info. If you want to join the conversation, you can send a message on WhatsApp or, join any of our streams on Facebook and on YouTube at Nigeria Info across all 3 states, Lagos, Abuja, and in Port Harcourt. You can also use our hashtag Nigeria Info RT. My final question on inflation, let me come to you, Solomon. This will be as quick as you can so we can move on to the next story. We're running out of time. What, in your opinion, must we do in the coming years to break this steady climb when it comes to inflation? What is that? Beyond what our colleagues have said already, what, in your opinion, would you say is that one thing the Nigeria should begin to pay attention to when it comes to this? Real quick.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriella. Just like you said, real quick, I'll try to tie everything up. Now, the most important thing we must continue to know as Nigerians is that we cannot continue to blame and put everything on government. Yes, government is responsible for our livelihoods, for our protection, and for our existence as a country. But we must never fail to acknowledge the Nigerian factor in whatever we are doing. We as Nigerians, we have a responsibility. As we are speaking now, many of us here will probably go to the market today or sometime this week. It is not the Minister of Industry and Trade or the Minister of Finance that goes to the market and knows very well that this particular ice fish, even with the inflation and the issues we have, should be sold at 600. But in Nigeria, like you and I, would sit down and say, okay, everything has gone up. And even if this fish, the price has not gone up, why wouldn't I just sell it 800? After all, the money for this has gone up. Let us tie this. So we must continue to look at the Nigerian factor. Let us not feel that government is the Jesus, permit me for quoting that, of everything. We as human beings have our own roles to play. The insecurity we keep on complaining about that is tied to every single challenge that we're facing as a country. It is not the president or it is not the vice president or the presidential candidate of any party or the chairman of any political party that goes on the Abuja-Kaduna road or goes on the road between Aba to Port Harcourt or even stays between Lagos and Shagamu and kidnaps people. No, it is people like you and I, people that are Nigerians, people that are from this country. So the most important thing I feel, yes, we need better policies. We need people in governance that are better informed, people that are less corrupt. We need people that are ready to do their own bidding to make this country better. But as Nigerians, presenters of Nigeria Info, human beings, listeners of this particular platform, everyone that wakes up and sleeps in this country, we have our own moral obligation. And if we do not begin to realize that and act towards that, then I think we'll continue having this conversation forever and ever. I don't think anything will ever change. Maybe we'll just have them in different languages, but the narrative will remain the same and the results will definitely remain the same, if not worse.
All right, let's talk about Sylvester Oromoni. That's a third topic on the show today. Now, this was a very big story that was still in our conversations up until January this year. It's the case of a 12-year-old boy, Sylvester Oromoni, who was reported to have died on the 30th of November last year as a result of alleged bullying and poisoning. Now, he was a student of Dowen College. It was alleged that before his death, that 5 students had beat him and forced him to drink a substance for refusing to join their cult. He was taken home and eventually died there. And this caused for a public outcry against the school authorities. And they were demanding strongly that the Lagos state government shut it down. Let me start with you, Lagos, in Lagos, Aghogho Oboh. How did this story make you feel when it first broke? And as a follow-up question to that, how widespread would you say, are cases of this nature within the school system in Lagos?
All right. So the Sylvester Oromoni story, like you rightly pointed out, is something that leaves a sore taste in everyone's boards. Exactly. I mean, everyone had to find his or her own part in how this story should have been taken care of, from the media to the family to the school authorities. I mean, yes, you say Lagos, it happening, but unfortunately, a lot of people got to learn and form their opinions on social media, which did a horrible job in pointing out what the facts were. So by the time they were able to get to what the facts of the matter were, it was too late. Many things, for example, that could have been prevented, even from the school side of view, wasn't there. So you had a lot of stories put out on social media which were far from the truth, sadly. It did raise a lot of concern, especially among parents and guardians, what happened to their children in schools. I mean, questions, for example, if a child is ill, what happens to that child? Does the school take responsibility? If the parent takes responsibility, what happens to that child when the child is in the parent's custody? And it was really unfortunate that at the end of the day, you had everyone trying to deflect, saying it wasn't my fault, and have a coroner's inquest now, asking those questions that the school should have been asked. And like we've tried to do with all the stories, whether going forward, if lessons have been learned by everyone, I sincerely doubt it also too. If you go through the comments, the interviews where we even send our correspondents to go find out what's happening there, it's still the same thing happening. Even sometimes you have the state government even step into the whole thing just for photo ops to show that they're being responsible. Right after that, you've had schools where things have happened where the school authorities have not paid attention to what is happening. They try to set up some sort of code of conduct for schools in the state. But if, like we say here, if it's not there, it's not there. In the way we deal with it. If you haven't made it a rule of thumb in how you deal with this sort of issues, it's going to keep repeating itself over and over again. And that's what we saw play out in the Oromoni situation. And I'm sure every parent went back home to ask themselves the same question. If we had a child who was sick in school, what would we do step 1, step 2, step 3 to prevent this from happening? I'm not too sure many people have the answers even as we speak up till now. So that's why I said you could see this happening again and again.
And let me come to you, Swat. Do you perhaps think that this speaks to the failure of, the school system, be it public schools or private schools? I mean, we have to remember some cases like the case of Don Davis Achibong, the GSS1 student of the Deeper Life High School in Uyo. His mother came out to cry, out early this year that her son was emaciated and had been a target of sodomy in that school. There was also the case of the GSS2 12-year-old boarding student of Premier Academy in Lugbe in Abuja. According to the report, she had taken ill and was unable to walk. It was a very painful, gory story to even follow about the fact that eventually when she was rushed to the hospital by her mother, doctors, observed a discharge from her private and eventually found that her urine revealed some dead spermatozoa, and she eventually died. So, I mean, these are just some of the recent cases in the past 6 months in Nigeria. So do you think perhaps this speaks to the failure of the school system? Is that what we have come to accept as normal?
Obviously, from our body language, it seems that's what's become the norm in society, and it's quite unfortunate, and that's why when we speak about situations, whether it's in the educational sector, in the health sector, and every other sector, it starts and finishes with leadership. I'm one person who seriously stands for, leadership. If there is failure in leadership, then there is going to be failure in every other, angle and aspect of that. So that's what we find in the educational system. Because we do not have good leadership at the very beginning. And I'm sorry for people who feel that everything, we always have to make mention of government. We have to, because it is a responsibility of government to put in systems in place and lead by example. Because if we do not see responsibility at the very top of it, then every other person can go haywire. I mean, just some minutes back, Solomon was talking about the fact that Nigerians, are the ones who perpetrate some things that we find in society. But I mean, once upon a time, let's take a walk back to during the military era, where we had stories, some of us were not probably old enough, but we had stories of how disciplined Nigerians were because they knew the consequences of their action. There was consequence for every action and inaction on your side as a citizen. And that's basically what happens in a society where you do not have consequence, you have impunity. So you go to the health system or you go to hospital and you do not have doctors attending to you. They're probably going out for other hustles instead of staying and attending to patients. And at the end of the day, nothing happens. Even if you want to sue them, they tell you, no, that's the way God wants it. We always have one excuse or the other to make for the very failures that we see in society and system. And that's what is very reflected within the educational system, So people just carry on anyhow. I mean, check out the number of unlicensed schools that are carrying on with a whole lot of impunity. Nobody checks them. You remember what happened in Kano, where that little girl was kidnapped by her own principal, or was it the proprietor of the school? So I feel that it's not just about the educational system failing. It's about a systemic failure or failure in terms of governance, and that is what has trickled down to our schools, to our hospitals, to every other, sector or aspect of our lives in Nigeria. And so because there is no sense of accountability, there is no sense of care in the system. Everybody just wants to put up a school and get the pupils to come and enroll and pay ridiculous amounts in terms of school fees, PTA, etc. Just get what you can and not actually living up to or giving value for the monies that they collect. And so we keep going on and on and on with this sort of things. And that's why what happened to Sylvester happened, in any society. I mean, I'm not saying that these things only happen in Nigeria. We have cases, of course, in other countries where you get to, but the frequency with which it happens here, some of these heartbreaking stories where students are raped by their own teachers, students are abused, physically, and a whole lot of other things that go down, is just a reflection of what our society has become. So yes, I agree totally that it's a failure of the educational system, but that would not be possible if we do not have failure at the very top.
All right.
So basically, that's it.
All right. So, Sam, I mean, that outrage that was generated by the death of Sylvester, it actually eventually forced the state government to temporarily shut down the school while, the investigation was still on at the time, about 200,000 people signed a petition that was seeking justice in this case. And I mean, there's no way to not notice that and take some form of action. Some people actually felt that the school management did not do enough to curb, bullying amongst its pupils in that school. I mean, for example, it took them a while, that's the school now, to, release an official statement. And even then, suggested he had injuries from playing football. And so there was a barrage of criticism, for the seeming obvious attempt to cover the unfortunate incident and douse the matter. So in that regard, Sam, what do you think should be the first response of a school when it comes to matters like this?
Well, it's difficult to say what the first response should be. First of all, I would like for the system to work because, like Swat said, it's a system error. If the operating system is dysfunctional, if it doesn't work well, you don't expect the apps to work well. So the fact that the system in which education operates, the country where these schools are running, there's space for things like this to happen. It allows these things to happen. We're talking about these ones because the ones that made the news, the parents came out on social media and talked. We can talk about the deeper life. We can even talk about the Christian school. We can talk about all these things because we heard about them. There are countless cases that we've not heard about, and even worse, we would never hear about. So the dismissive nature of these schools, when these things happen, they put out a statement and say, oh, it's that's what killed him, or that's not why he was sick, it's because he went to play football. It's similar to what we hear from the authorities. When soldiers or police officers are accused of something, and then you get a statement saying it's not our men. We're not. It's the kind of thing we hear in this other sector. So it's a system problem, and these things can happen because certain things are not fully functional. If we know that there is punishment, if you know that if this happens on your watch, you will actually do the time. Justice will be swift. There will be less cases of these things happening. I remember after the Sylvester issue, lots of conversations on radio and on different platforms where, would you let your child go to a boarding school? I went to a boarding school, but I will not let my child go to a boarding school, not even because of the Sylvester issue, because there are a couple of things connected to being away from your child for that long.
Right.
A term is made up of 3-4 months, not knowing what happens to your child. And as much as you're scared that your child might be bullied, your child might be the bully. So I'm not ready to let them go at that point in their lives. Not just because the system is work in progress, but there are just too many things connected to this. What we have learned.
Drinking Gary and Granot is an overrated experience.
Hello, Gabriella. Hold on. I enjoy Gary and Granot. Please, don't insult our Gary. So,
good afternoon.
If you just think about it, the fact that there are problems in the system. And another thing is, expensive does not necessarily equate quality. The fact that a school costs 5 million for a term or a session, it doesn't mean that it translates to quality. And I'm talking quality education, I'm talking quality food, I'm talking quality experience, I'm talking security and protection for the kids. So give your kids the best possible education you can afford, but monitor them. Literally be turn to CCTV. Your eye should be on them steady. And it's not just, it's happening in Nigeria, it happens everywhere. But for Nigeria, you must take extra care. So that's my position on Sylvester, on Chrisland, on Deeper Life, on all the schools.
All right, let's take some comments on WhatsApp. Remember, you can be a part of the conversation. You can send a message to our WhatsApp number, 0809-030-6416. You can also drop your thoughts on our social media platforms on Facebook across all 3 stations in Abuja, in Lagos, and here in Port Harcourt. On WhatsApp, Nasiru Abdul Jalil from Amac says, good afternoon to you all. Please, you people should forget about what Mr. President tweeted, because it's like you people are adding salt to injury. The tweet has been regulated. Swat and other critics of this government, if you're not okay with that, you can challenge that in court. Okay, that's a message from Abdul. Thank you very much for that. And this one here says, I lost that message. I'm going to try to get that back. But let me come to you now, Joyce. still on this, Sylvester's case, many people argued that there was some level of negligence. I mean, that has been established already. But on the part of the parents, some people were actually arguing that there was a level of negligence, reliance on miracle healing and religious authority over, medical treatments on their part. So in your opinion, do you see how that played a role in his death? And where do we actually begin in drawing the line between religion and medicine in Nigeria?
Religion and medicine. Oh, well. Let's talk about negligence first. Yes. Oh, an absolute yes.
That is safe. That is safer.
I feel like a tornado is coming.
Not necessarily safe, but because it requires a little bit of explaining. Okay. But here it is. You see, not just the Naira is being eroded by inflation and devaluation, but morals are also being eroded. Parents have pretty much replaced what priorities, replaced their priorities in life generally. I think because the pursuit of money appears to be the determinant of happiness. And so parents are relinquishing their responsibility to schools, to helps, to everybody else, and, pursuing money. And when we look at their negligence, you really have to do a thorough job of analysis. One, looking at what was a parent doing. Many parents are looking for money. In fact, after his death, someone tweeted, and God, I hope it's a lie, that there are people who live in Lekki and send their children to boarding schools within Lekki.
Wow.
So it seems as though the parents need room, they need time. Everybody's onto something else. It's like even our priorities for life has also changed. And when we have made the pursuit of money a higher priority than the raising of people or children, we can pretty much understand the bearing on society. When we look at society today, it's anybody's guess why people are the way that they are, corrupt, immoral, or what have you by outcome. The relationship between religion and medicine, it's dicey in the sense that miracles exist and that transcends science, something that even scientists agree. So if a person chooses to believe in miracles, the question is, we want to interrogate their understanding of their faith. Now, I don't think any doctor or any relative has time to do that. It seems as though the individual who believes in miracles is believing that something can happen. And like my father would say, you cannot argue a man's conviction. If I believe in miracles, then at some point you have to allow me both the faith and the responsibility of believing in that thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong in believing in miracles. I believe in miracles by the doctrine of my faith. In fact, by the projection of my reality, I've seen miracles even happening in my life. So, for example, as an individual, I would not subject my belief in miracles to public interrogation as to suppose that I might not have proof of it, and as such, it does not exist. So people believe in miracles, one, because it does exist. But some people are not informed enough. In fact, their faith has not even developed to the degree to which they can truly believe that they believe in miracles. And many times it's just a religious pattern, is what their religiosity has pushed them into doing. And I cannot speak for anyone. So that's what makes the question, a little dicey. I cannot speak for everyone. But what do you do with a man who says he believes in miracles? It's like, are you sure? There's hospital, I'm paying. And he says, no, I won't go. There's health insurance. You don't have to. No, I want it. If they say that they want it, then you have to allow them what they have chosen. It's a choice. So these are two interdependent somewhat, but also individualized aspects of psychology. And a man must make his choices. So I leave a man to his faith.
All right.
All right, Sam,
I'd like to come in
back
here.
on WhatsApp. Okay, yeah, Sam, go ahead. I'll get to WhatsApp shortly.
All right. So as Joyce said, which I completely agree with, some people want to put science on one end and religion on the other. It's not either or. Because if I believe in miracles and I have something and I pray to God, or I go to a spiritual healer, I go to my pastor, wherever I want to find this spiritual healing, I need to know what I have. And that is where science comes in. I go to the professionals, they say, oh, Sam, you have this, you have that. Then when I go for prayer, I would say, oh, this is what I have. Let us pray for that. As to whether the parents of Sylvester did not play their part, it's going to be difficult to tell. But I mean, there were interviews, some family members who did not want to be named. Some people claim that if the family were more interested in turning to medical help as against turning on the camera, if they did not spend so much time trying to, literally make it a show, maybe they could have saved this boy. If he got medical attention a little earlier, because it was clear from the videos we saw that this boy was in pain. And some people said, oh, he went to this hospital. They said the doctor told him to use balm. They said this. And some people were like, why did they not do enough? It's going to be difficult to answer that question. So when we're looking to, oh, it's a spiritual healer, I got my miracle here, the doctors were not involved, can we at least go to science to know what it is first, before we now take it to wherever we think we can now get that spiritual help? They don't have to work against each other. That's my position.
I think it's going to be very difficult, Sam, because again, I'm speaking from the reality of some Nigerians. You find that in Nigeria, it's an African problem, but specifically in Nigeria, we have a strong attachment to our religion. And that's why you find somewhat, I again, just like Joyce said, I totally agree in, I believe in miracles, that can happen. But you find people take it to the extreme, to another level, where they would rather speak to their pastors or their religious leaders before taking anything, even to as basically as giving birth. I've heard stories of women who died in labor because they were waiting for the go-ahead of their religious leaders. So we do have a mentality problem when it comes to religion. And for some Nigerians, it really is not a complementary relationship between medicine and religion. It's I'm all in for what my papa says or what my GO says, as opposed to whatever the doctor is telling you is the problem. So I think it's a very strong problem we do have. But we do have some comments on WhatsApp. We'll get back to the conversation shortly. Right Time from Port Harcourt says, the inflation in Nigeria is getting crazier by the day. It affects the common man more, and the effects are going to be devastating to the socio-economic development and survival of the Nigerian people. The government must step up and function effectively. Thank you very much, Right Time, for your comment. Dr. Ben Nyewusira says, what is stopping you, the discussants, from joining politics to drive the desirable change? Is that a question any of you would like to answer? Dr. Ben is asking.
We already have jobs. I don't think I'm doing badly here.
All right, let me get to Abuja.
We could send Solomon as a representative for us.
Yeah, we already have Solomon rightly positioned. It would not be too difficult to do that.
That could work.
All right, to you, Solomon. Now, still talking about this Sylvester's kid. It's a very, it leaves a very sour taste in our mouths, and that's because this could have happened to anybody's child. It really could have. It could have been anyone's child. It didn't just have to be theirs. So while Sam was speaking, he was talking about the fact that parents in Nigeria need to pay peculiar attention to the welfare of their kids. When you consider your child being in a boarding school, I don't know what it's like in Abuja, so you might want to tell us what boarding school system is like in Abuja. What role do you think parents can play when it comes to paying that extra attention to the welfare of their children?
Okay, thank you so much for asking that particular question. Now, just like you've said, this particular problem is not just from one dimension. I think the biggest issue we have has to be the judiciary, because sometimes you look at the punishment being meted out to people that are found culpable in these cases. Sometimes it's even very hard to prove these particular cases. It's so unfortunate because it just shows that, yes, the system can be manipulated, because we have various cases. This particular case in Abuja here with Karen Hapuch, I'm very close to the case. I work with some of the CSOs that are following up on this case, and you can see the frustration whenever they speak to you, because they are trying to tell you that the system is not working in a way that they can bring forth their case. So I think we need to give the judiciary, we need them to answer a lot of questions as regards this. But now let's go back to the last point that Sammy made, and I'm totally in support of that. It's so unfortunate, just like I mentioned earlier, and I'm so sorry my colleague here beside me is going to disagree with me, but I'll say it again, and I will say it any day as long as I'm alive. We need to reduce the way we apportion every blame for government. Somebody eats beans and it's salty, he says it's the government. Somebody eats rice and the color is not white, he says it's the government. Let us cut them some slack, because we own some of the responsibility. For example, I know children in this Abuja, very unfortunate, under the ages of 2 years. For goodness sake, you are dropping them at a school just because you want to stay and make money. Which is not
cut you short there, Solomon.
Early at 7 a.m. and pick them 7 p.m. For goodness sake, God forbid anything happens. I think the parents should be equally jailed as perpetrators. So we
let
need
me
to
quickly
focus.
jump in there, Solomon, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry to cut you short in there, but don't you think, again, it's a wrong thing, by all standards for a 2-year-old to be in boarding school. But don't you think the harsh economic conditions of Nigeria has motivated for that to happen? I mean, there was a time in Nigeria where, some people did not necessarily have to work. Women did not have to work at a time in Nigeria. But right now, all hands are on deck. People are working. They have 9-to-5s and have side businesses just to make ends meet. You have parents who practically work all day, round the clock, so they can put food on the table, provide better welfare for their children than they enjoyed, and give the children the best education. You can't do that, stringing a 2-year-old along with you. So don't you think, again, I'm not trying to say, yes, we need to, point fingers at the government at all times, but at the end of the day, you can't really avoid it because, again, we're working with a harsh economic condition.
You cannot eat your cake and have it under any circumstance, in any country or whatever condition. What you are saying might not be far from the truth. Yes, we have a more harsh economic climate now, and not just in Nigeria. That is something everybody should know. The challenges we are having financially in Nigeria, it is not peculiar to this particular country. It's everywhere, and every country is looking for a particular solution tailor-made for its own self to solve these problems. In Nigeria, you cannot tell me because you are looking for money, or because you are hungry, or because you are not eating, or because you need to pay bills, you now drop your child under the age of 2 in a crèche, and you pick him as late as 7. A lot of people send their children to boarding school. I went to a boarding school in Abuja here, and I knew how the system was then, and I can tell you it's a totally different thing now. The cases we are mentioning, the cases of Karen Hapoch, Oromoni, they are just few cases. I know plenty cases. I know several of them that have not even come to the media light. And it's not just a matter of maybe they were sexually abused, but there are a lot of things. So the whole idea of parents keeping their children in boarding schools, I'm not a big fan, especially with the way things are going now. We must, no matter what it will cost, we must learn to sacrifice some time for our children. We must, because if we do not do that and we keep on looking for money, we can see the kind of result we're getting. So you cannot have your cake and eat it at all. It must be one or the other. You must look for a way to balance, but you cannot completely have both. So if you decide that you are going to look for money because the challenges we have economically are very, very serious and are very, very threatening, that is okay. But whoever does that is doing that at the peril of his own child. And whenever we have conversations like this, that is where you see, that is the root cause of issues that we have like that. A lot of negligence. We must blame parents, in as much as we must give them kudos for being able to fend for their wards and children. We must blame them because there's a lot of negligence. I'm not just talking about sexual abuse. Cases of drug abuse, a lot of children have strayed into activities that they have no business, being partakers of. But it is same negligence because a lot of people were living in a world where the only thing that matters is money. Good. If you feel the only thing that matters is money, then such people should not be concerned when we see such devastating results like we're seeing in these cases.
All right, let me come back to you, Aghogho. Now, in Lagos State specifically, there are over 20,000 private schools, from primary to tertiary level. As of May last year, only a quarter of that number has been approved by the state government. That's about 5,000 of that. So that's leaving the remaining 15,000 schools unapproved, without any kind of regulation or approval to work. And you could as well just say that they are illegally operated. I know there was a time in Nigeria we had inspectors who would go around from school to school to inspect, the status of the classrooms, the teacher-student experience. I don't think we have that anymore. So do you think perhaps there should be a monitoring body that closely and frequently monitors outside the classroom experiences and interactions within the school system?
Right. I was also going to let you know, I was putting it online that Desmond Majekodumi, who's an environmental activist and has a show here, also stepped in, and I'm sure we'll probably say a couple of things before we go. But to the point you make about the educational system in Lagos State, it's fascinating that a lot of people look at the standards in Lagos and assume that everything is up to standard. But unfortunately, they've got a lot of problems here too. You have at least 2.5 million children who are out of school in Lagos State. Very few people are aware of this, and that pressure is going through with all of the system, like we used to say in university,
right,
analysis and plan for Lagos State, and that's a big problem. So if you would look at what happened with the COVID-19 period, you see that many of the schools had to struggle because the public schools cannot meet the huge demand of children in the state. So you've got private schools that have been set up, and many of them, like you have all pointed out, don't meet the required standards for the state. So the system which worked maybe in the 60s and 70s, that model, I dare say, you put it up in place now, you'll find a big problem in the way it's going to be enforced. Like in many areas of development in the state, you've talked about, you guys talked about collapsed building. The problem of enforcement because they cannot handle the numbers of buildings which are cropping up. How many people are you going to employ for enforcement? How many people are you going to employ to have a look at what is going on in terms of development control, even for the school? So it's such a huge problem we're dealing with here, and it will require, to this point, I probably agree with Solomon on this point too, a concerted effort. But then you must have the people in play. You can't plan for the people. Rather, you can't plan. You can't plan for the people. You have to plan with them. Put them in the plan, and that way they will feel a sense of ownership of the policy whenever it sees the light of day.
Right. This will be my final question. Let me ask you, Joyce, before we get to the guest in the Lagos studio. Now, there were some claims that sparked, public outrage as well when it came to the death of this student, in particular, Sylvester. They claimed that he was forcefully given a dangerous chemical substance to drink, by the alleged teenage students at Bowen College. And some also claimed that, it was because he refused to join their cult. Now, this claim was emboldened by an autopsy that circulated online a few days after Sylvester's death. And, they actually said, according to that autopsy, that he had acute lung injury due to chemical intoxication and a background of forced trauma. Now, talking about the issue of cultism in secondary schools in the country is no longer news. I mean, even in primary schools these days, you find that we're having conversations about primary school students, pupils who are engaging in cultism. What kind of sanitation do you think can be done to eradicate this issue of cultism in our schools?
A restoration of morality. Morality has been eroded. Again, I made a comment earlier on that spoke about not just the naira or the value of the naira being eroded, but also morality being eroded. In fact, there's a bearing on how people have become increasingly immoral due to their pursuit of what is said to be a means to an end. People want to survive. Now, fraud in society. In fact, this is even how I like to put it. I think Nigeria has successfully raised a generation of fraudsters. We wake up everywhere, and something like Yahoo is a term that even children who are 7 years old know. Prostitution is on the rise, whether you think it's corporate prostitution, whether you think is street prostitution, it's a thing. Yesterday, there's a video I saw on social media of a young guy who appeared to be like 28 on the streets, equally prostituting. And it's comical because one suggests, oh, maybe he's just trying to have fun. But no, he's on the streets alongside women. And the person who recorded him asked him, why are you here? He said he's here for hookup. And the gentleman asked him, how much your bill a night? And he said 8,000 naira. It's a shame that we can extract comedy from something as that. The society is degraded. There's no other term for it. So if we're going to get kids to find their path to righteousness, then we have to restructure society. It's not enough to tell the guy not to do fraud. Of course, his conscience should tell him not to do it. But if you don't give him a job and he's supposed to feed, it sounds as though the next available form of evil is something he's going to perpetrate. This is why I find it a little bit disconcerting, and I'm a little uncomfortable allowing Solomon get away with this. There's something that he said which implies that the parents of children are making money the priority. When I made that statement, it wasn't in criticism of parents. In fact, right now, the Nigeria that you have today, no Nigerian is at luxury. Maybe the elite or upper class, but even upper class, for you to remain upper class, you better be working. Because I mean, look at your exchange rate market, your bank market, your dollar in the banks is 400 plus naira. Your parallel market is 600 and something. So on every dollar, the Nigerian is losing over 200 naira. I want to buy dollars. That's how I know. So I'm going to be buying 600 plus naira to a dollar.
Buy Sefa.
No, that's the thing, because I need to pay in dollars. So Solomon is saying, Solomon, you disregard the pain that the average Nigerian is confronted by. They don't have an option but to go out there and work. We are even in luck that there are still people who are committed to decency, morality, maybe it's even faith that's keeping them from stealing, robbing, killing. I want to even ask you, Solomon, do you eat butter? Do you understand that butter should not be luxury? For a country that rears cows, for a commentary that has...
Of course, I totally understand.
No, hold on a second, though. Hold on a second. Because what you're not going to do is undermine the pain of the Nigerian. This level of poverty is sin.
There's pain, economic pain.
This level of poverty is a sin. It should not exist for the kind of blessing Nigeria has.
Solomon is going to the extreme. Joyce is going to the other.
Gentlemen, I think I
find a balance.
Exactly.
We have to find a balance.
Sadly, we're running out of time. Sorry to cut you short there, Swat.
I'm tempted to shout order.
Sorry to cut you short there.
That time that you set aside for family. So however you're going to, carve that time, you need to, because there needs to be a balance. We have seen how children have become
we're running out of time,
so
sorry to cut you short
there. The parents didn't have enough time. So, hustling, making money cannot just be adequate excuse. You have to make that time, because that is why you're the parent. You brought them into the world, so you have a responsibility. On the other side, you cannot just abdicate or sublet your duty to the school, and because you feel the school is going to take care of it, that suffices. So I think for me, everything just has to be on a balance, and we have to find out whether we like it or not. If not, society is going to go haywire. Seriously.
Thank you, Swat. Thank you very much for passionately conveying that message. Thank you. We're having less than 5 minutes to wrap this conversation up. So let's just quickly touch on Nigeria's failure to qualify for the World Cup. Football lovers, I'll start with you, Aghogho. Just in 1 minute. How did that make you feel? What did we do wrong? What can we do differently going forward? I'll give
my 1 minute to Desmond. It's Abuja people. They played that match in Abuja. That's why we did not qualify. So they should answer that question. So maybe Desmond, my 1 minute.
The giant of Africa.
Real quick,
we have
to be press the time. We have to wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that we just didn't live up to expectations, but it's understandable, because if you just check out the whole process that trains those people, those warriors who are supposed to be representing the giant of Africa, the great Nigeria, you see, chop and wipe mouths. That's what causes this kind of situation. And another thing that causes it is whatsoever you sow. So we got to sow the right thing into our sports people, raise them up, and Nigeria shall shine from the pedestal that she was destined to shine from.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On this note, I really have to thank my honorable gentlemen of the press for making this a very interesting conversation. It's been a worthy 2 hours. We have to wrap it up now, but I'll just I'll take a final word, maybe in 10 seconds. Just I'll start with you, Swat, and then to you, Solomon. 10 seconds. Make it as short as you can. We have to go now, and then Sam, in that order, and Joyce, and finally Aghogho. Let's go, Swat.
Okay, I think everything starts and finishes with leadership. We need good leadership, and I think the ace is in the hands of Nigerians right now. Go get your PVC, do the needful, and let's entrench good governance in Nigeria by electing worthy people. Don't come back tomorrow complaining about inflation. I mean, we don't have any reason talking about inflation and a whole lot of things that we see in society if we had the right leadership. I'm a strong believer that it starts and ends with good leadership. And so let's entrench good leadership in this country by ensuring we get our PVC and voting in the right people when the time is right.
Okay, thank you so much. My own last words is we need to own and we need to take responsibility. Government cannot be responsible for everything. As Nigerians, we need to be upright citizens, do the right thing, follow the necessary laws, pray to God, love our neighbors like ourselves, do everything humanly possible. Then
thank you very much.
The rest of government and hope they do their bit.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Solomon. Over to you, Sam.
All right. I'd like to not think too. Yes, I'd like to not think too hard about buying a bag of rice. It shouldn't be too much of a bother, It should just happen, and that's what is happening because I'll have to get a bag of rice today. Thank you.
Joyce?
Thank you all for your time. Thank you.
And me, quite a former United States President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Our problems are man-made and can be solved by man. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, Nigeria, for joining us on the roundtable today. It continues tomorrow on the #1 talk news and sports radio station, Nigeria Info. I am Gabriella. Don't go away.